going to get wet. That means a wet morning commute. There'll probably be some puddling in some areas and pooling because, we haven't had any significant rain in so long. It's going to take the ground a little bit of time to absorb this rainfall. That system's going to sweep out of here fairly early tomorrow, certainly by about midday. So we'll get a little bit of partial clearing, drying out late tomorrow into tomorrow night. The current storm that we're looking at ranks 1 on the storm impact scale, and even going into tomorrow, its intensity will be considered a light intensity. So we'll keep that number 1 ranking there. Showers this evening, moderate rain overnight, breezy at times. But as we look ahead at rainfall estimates from the current system, going into nighttime hours, as I mentioned, just a few more hundredths of an inch expected during this evening's rainfall. But tomorrow's rainfall will bring another quarter of an inch to an inch. A quarter of an inch for locations in the East Bay and the Santa Cruz Mountains and the South Bay. Going up to the farther northern reaches of the Bay Area, we can see another inch of rain from this rather significant system coming through tomorrow evening. So I can stop it right there unless you need me to go further into the weekend when we expect some stronger storms.
Well, I do have a couple questions.
Yeah.
That's probably great with the graphics and also the numbers, but I'm wondering, because this is going to go on for a few days, Spencer, how worried are you about a lot of flooding, and perhaps especially in those scarred areas from all the wildfires, right? What are we looking at?
There could be a little bit of runoff in those burn scar areas from the rain we're having right now and the additional rain that'll come overnight. I don't think any significant flooding or widespread problems are expected from this current rain or tonight's rain. It's the stronger, heavier rain coming in over the weekend, Saturday night, Sunday into Monday. That's going to be steadier rain without much of a break. And that could produce some localized flooding, could produce some, mudsliding and runoff from the burn scar area. So there may be some concern then.
I want to get you back to working on the 4 o'clock forecast, but I want to ask you real quickly, by the time this is all done, how much of a dent do you think it'll make towards our drought, right? But also in the shorter term, like the fire season, wildfire season this year?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to go out on a limb and predict that this is the end of the wildfire season, but this certainly reduces the risk of near future wildfires because we're getting much needed rainfall for the vegetation and to get the ground a little bit more saturated. But if we were to get one of those strong offshore wind events, that could dry out the vegetation again very quickly. So I don't want to say this is the end of the wildfire season, but it certainly reduces our concern about wildfires. As for the drought, the entire state is in either severe or exceptional drought. It's not likely that this rain is going to change that ranking, but it certainly helps. This is the most beneficial rain we've seen in probably a year, when you count what's coming in this weekend.
All right, Spencer, thank you so much. We'll see you again at 4 o'clock today. The storms we're getting should reduce our seasonal wildfire threat in the near future, as you just heard from Spencer. But what about the long run? What do we need to do to prevent the kind of devastating wildfires we've had in recent years? Joining us to talk about this in this week, the 30th anniversary of the Oakland Hills firestorm, is UC Berkeley Professor of Fire Science, Scott Stevens. Professor Stevens, thank you so much for your time.
Happy to be here.
Look, we're happy to see this rain, but obviously when we talk about the long term, it's not just getting some rain. There's a whole lot of things, many things that we have to do to minimize our chances of having another Paradise, another Oakland Hills. But before we get into that, because I know you have solutions, why do fire conditions seem to be getting worse and worse over time?
Well, it's really true that climate change is impacting our fire regimes. There's no doubt it is. We're getting warmer. We're getting more variation in weather patterns. We know we're in a severe 2-year drought, almost as dry as 76, 77, which was worse. So when you compound that with more heat, this drying of fuels, and then when you have a tapestry of fuels and kind of the way we already are, that was already vulnerable already, we add to that the climate change impacts, it makes it worse.
All right. Here in California, we've taken the fire suppression approach for decades, right? Really a century, putting a fire out the second it breaks out in a forest. What's been the result of that?
Well, we really have changed the fundamental character of our forests. If you look at data from early 1900s, maybe you have 30, 40, 50 trees per acre. Many places today we have 250, 300. We used to have openings between big trees. And then when fire happened, both from indigenous burning, from tribes, and also from lightning, you had essentially kind of more of a system that worked. Small flame lengths didn't really get into the crown. Some areas of mortality, small, couple acres, 5 acres, something like that. But then when you take fire out for so long and also do some harvesting practices for many years, also just focused on the big giant trees, leave a lot of space for the little trees to get established, and lo and behold, 100 years later, we got problems.
Well, the Biden administration's infrastructure plan does contain money to thin forests and do prescribed burns. How useful is that, do you think?
I think it's very useful. I mean, one thing you could say is the resources are coming much more than they did in the last, say, 5-10 years. The state of California, last year, the Brown administration into the Newsom administration, providing really significant resources to do work on private lands, even on federal lands in some areas through partnership. And I do think the infrastructure bill will add to that from the federal side. I hope we can also kind of develop a plan that actually is more action oriented versus maybe just a little bit more like we're going to plan better, we're going to do something on the edges or the fringes a little better. That's just not going to work. We've really got to do decisive change to tackle this problem. We cannot continue to do what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 decades.
Look, part of the reason the fires are more devastating when they happen is because we're building more and more houses and moving people into forested areas, creating more of the so-called wildland urban interface, right, where people in our urban environment meet the wildland. I think this is a good time to bring it up because we've been covering the 1991 Oakland Hills firestorm all this week, 30th anniversary. You know, what actions were taken, do you think, to try to prevent another repeat? Do you feel like have really made a dent that will make another such fire, you know, less possible? And what more do you think needs to be done that hasn't been done?
Well, you're right. We really have done better since 91. I was at the 91 fire, like many people probably listening to the broadcast. It was devastating. Done a lot better with kind of coordinating suppression response, coordinating kind of even the fire hose sizes and things that weren't compatible in 91. And I give credit for that. One thing I still think we have to do better, though, is get our houses and the adjoining vegetation better prepared. You know, if you go up and down the East Bay Hills, you go to a lot of places in California, the Sierra foothills, many of these areas are still incredibly vulnerable. When you look at the housing construction, maybe vegetation still right on top of houses, even litter on top of roofs and things of that nature, these are so vulnerable. I'm afraid people just don't realize quite yet how vulnerable they are. But I do give credit because when I drive around the Bay Area, drive around the California landscape, I see more and more people taking action. I think that has to continue. We've got to get community level responses kind of more coordinated at the community level and actually try to move forward.
I worry a little bit about, you know, whatever actions we started 30 years ago in that aftermath. With climate change worsening things in the last 30 years, it feels like you're always trying to play catch up.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. When you think about just our current conditions, you know, we've carried these conditions of high hazards in our wildlands and also near our communities, you know, for decades and decades and decades. My predecessor at UC Berkeley, Harold Biswell, wrote his first paper on this in 1958 and actually recommended kind of some ideas, prescribed burning and other measures, and didn't really take off from a kind of a policy standpoint. So you're right. The culmination of all this, I would say, in action takes us to a point now when climate change comes over the top, we've got really big issues. So it even tells me that we have to take decisive action. It just can't be something like, well, we're just going to go a little better. We'll treat maybe 15% more acres. We'll try to work with communities and, you know, reduce vulnerability. It's going to take more decisive action. It's really going to take something that in some ways going to make people maybe a little more uncomfortable because of the scale of it, but I don't see any other recourse. For
the folks who are not sure how this impacts them, right? This impacts them because maybe they don't live in those areas where you get these wildfires. In what other ways do wildfires near them affect their lives that maybe they don't even realize?
Well, one thing I think everybody knows now, look at the smoke impacts that are happening in this state. You know, in 2020, we had the North Complex fire. That was a fire that burned in the Middle Fork of the Feather River. It was one of those lightning fires that basically got ignited like all the others all over the state, including the Bay Area. But remember that day, we all got up and we looked in the sky and it was orange-red. That turned out to be the big push of the North Complex fire that burned a giant area of forest, unfortunately killed 15 people, and then put so much smoke in the atmosphere, came over to the Bay Area, interacted with the fog layer, and turned the whole sky orange-red. The impacts of fire now are actually really some ways unprecedented. It's impacting everybody in this state from an air quality standpoint, from economic impacts. People can't get to work. Tourism is down. So I think now we've got to a point now where I don't know if there's any place in this state that's not impacted by fire.
All right, Scott Stevens, UC Berkeley Professor of Fire Science. Thank you so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Happy to have been here.
To see more about the Oakland Hills firestorm, including footage not seen since the day of that fire, check out Firestorm, the East Bay Hills fire. It's available at ABC7news.com and streaming on the ABC7 Bay Area app on your TV. Coming up next, the latest with COVID-19, news on vaccines, boosters, and variants. So get your questions in on Facebook Live or YouTube. We'll be right back.
In commercial break.
All right, in commercial break. All right, I'm seeing programming or commercial, so I'm not sure what's happening on Facebook Live. Am I on Facebook Live?
Yes.
Do we have a commercial break question? Hi, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. My water break is over, and I see some of you have questions for Spencer, so I'm going to address it to him. Spencer's good enough to join us again.
Sure.
Erica, you want to know about going forward. What does winter look like? Got some info for Erica?
I do have some info. So right now the Climate Prediction Center is saying this is going to be a drier than average winter, despite the obviously welcome and beneficial rain that we're expecting over the next few days, because there is a La Nina pattern developing in the Pacific, which will mean that storms will be, rain will be heavier across the northern tier of states, but rain will be below average across the southern tier of states, which would include the Bay Area, of course.
All right. Steve wants to know what's going down in L.A.
What's going on in L.A.?
Yeah, I'm hoping he means weather-wise.
I hope so, too. If it's something exciting, let's go down there.
I know.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's not going on in L.A. The Dodgers are most likely not going to win the NLCS now. Ooh, did I just say that out loud?
It appears that way.
Yeah.
It looks like the drought is more severe in Southern California than it is here. So that's
Thank you, Spencer.
Yeah.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. Boosters and a new descendant of the Delta variant are leading COVID-19 headlines today. Joining us now is UCSF Emergency Room Doctor Jean Noble. Dr. Noble, good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Before we get to those headlines, I want to ask you about something that I know you're very passionate about, the impact of COVID policy on children. Yesterday, California public health officials said they will not relax school mask mandates, so kids should expect to wear masks in school, in the classroom, all through the winter. Quote, now is not the time to let our guard down. Do you agree with this?
No, I don't agree with it at all. I mean, what we were really looking for from the California Department of Public Health are metrics. We need off-ramps for our kids, for our families. We've been in this pandemic for almost 2 years, and what CDPH released was just this very vague masks through the winter. Meanwhile, for adults outside of the public school system, we have metrics. We know what our rates need to be to take our masks off. It's really puzzling to me why kids are not afforded this same sort of optimistic path to know when it is that they're going to be able to be rid of COVID restrictive policies.
All right, if you were at the table helping to shape those metrics, the off-ramp, if you will, what do you think it should be? You refer to the fact that Bay Area health officers came together, right, put out these rules saying, hey, indoor masking can go away when we're in yellow for 3 weeks in terms of transmission and 80% of the population of that county is vaccinated. Do you think for schools it should be that or a little different?
I think that would be fine for schools. I mean, schools are not going to unmask the kids while the surrounding county is still masking. So that's already a given. But using an 80% vaccination rate for schools seems entirely appropriate. Other places are doing it. The state of Massachusetts is doing it. It says we already know schools are a lower risk setting than the surrounding communities. So why we can't use similar vaccine mandates for these safer settings is really quite perplexing, and I'm afraid it's going to erode public trust in our public health officials.
All right, now let's talk about this new Delta descendant. It goes by, I think, AY 4.2. What do we know about it?
We don't know a lot. It might be a little bit more infectious than the Delta variant, but what people should know is it doesn't look like it's going to be a game changer from what we know this far. It is probable that it is a bit more infectious, but it's not like the big jump between the Alpha variant and the Delta variant, where we saw a huge increase in infectivity. We aren't seeing that yet with this new variant, although it's still new. We're only talking about a handful of cases, so a little too early to say.
Okay, so overall, right now you're watching it, but not too concerned about it yet?
Correct.
Okay. A CDC panel today, let's talk about this, big news, just endorsed the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson boosters for millions of people. So what are the next steps? Because people are asking me, when can they actually book those appointments for their shots?
I think that'll be announced soon. It should be upcoming very shortly. In the next days, I think people will know when they're going to be able to book their vaccination. So that's it's right there coming down the pike. I think really though, keeping our eye on the prize should be working on the vaccine hesitant individuals. Boosting is great, but to really get beyond this pandemic, we need to reach the unvaccinated in our population. And so that's where I would really like to see our public attention focused.
All right. As you know, part of this, they are allowing for the mixing and matching, so to speak. So what would you do? Because people are asking, should I get a JJ again if that's what I got the first time? Or if I got Moderna before, should I get another Moderna? Because mixing is supposedly good, but Moderna is supposedly more effective looking at the numbers. And I know it's pretty confusing. So if you can kind of give us what you would approach it, how you would approach it.
Right. I think the bottom line is that our vaccines, even without boosting, are very good. So you're talking about really benefit on the margin. They're great vaccines, and so we're trying to squeeze out a little more benefit from a really good product. So it's hard to say that mixing and matching is really going to be measurably better. It makes good physiologic sense to mix and match and optimize your immunity. I think that that's a great idea for people to do if that's available to them. But at the end of the day, I don't think it makes a big quantitative difference. You can boost with whatever is available to you, and you're going to be very well protected.
Okay, real quickly, Randy has a great question, which I should have asked you about the AY 4.2. Is it here in the U.S. or in the Bay Area yet?
I don't know about the Bay Area. There's only been really a handful of cases in the United States, I think 5 or less. So it's really, we don't know a lot yet, but what we do know is that we suspect that there's a slight increase in transmissibility, but not a game changer.
Okay, and based on the current timeline, do you think 5 to 11-year-olds could have maybe gotten one or perhaps both shots in before Thanksgiving when families will gather? Because I think they're going to take this up early November for approval, right?
Yes, I think that is quite likely. Before, I think last time I was on the show saying I thought shots would be in arms just before Halloween. It looks like the FDA, the decision will be made probably in November 1st, November 2nd, but should be approved soon thereafter. So looking like the first week of November, those first shots will go into arms.
All right, we have a viewer question that we want to get to. They're wondering if it's safe to get vaccinated while they're breastfeeding.
Yes, it is indeed safe. Pregnant women, lactating women should definitely get vaccinated. It's an incredibly safe vaccine and really quite protective. So by all means, yes.
Okay, and if you've already gotten 2 shots of a vaccine, say Moderna, is there any reason to think that with the third one, the booster, which I understand is half the dose, you would get a different sort of reaction that you didn't already see from the first 2 shots, but perhaps side effects, things like that?
Yeah, it's the third shot looks thus far like it's quite similar to the second, so I don't think that people should suspect anything different. You're likely to react quite similarly. We haven't seen any more adverse reactions from that third shot, whether it's the same series or mix and matched.
All right, great information, Dr. Jean Noble of UCSF. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, a Haitian-born entrepreneur is giving back by launching a new publication. Interesting how Whoopi Goldberg and Patrick Swayze are involved. Next.
In commercial break.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm going to leave you to enjoy our lovely slate while I take my water break. The Haitian immigrant crisis has impacted a lot of people, including a local entrepreneur born in Haiti, but she immigrated to California as a teenager. Since then, she has launched a publication dedicated to highlighting talent from underrepresented communities, and she's celebrating with a launch event tomorrow. This story also involves Whoopi Goldberg and Patrick Swayze. Intrigued? Well, joining us now is the founder and creative director of Trura magazine, Tristan Cunningham. Tristan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Kristen. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. You're coming to me from San Francisco, right?
I am. I'm local in San Francisco, yes.
I know. I love the story because it is local, but you had to find your place not only in the fashion industry, but also as a teenager moving from Haiti to the U.S. Tell us about the circumstances.
You know, it was a very difficult time. I was a teenager at the time, and we were very lucky to be able to come to the U.S. with my family. And it was an adjustment for sure. You know, we speak French in Haiti, and English was my second language, and I barely spoke English. I was a teenager, and I went to all girls Catholic school. So it was definitely an adjustment, and it was hard. I won't say it was easy. There was definitely a romance about coming to California, but you know, once I got here, it was very, it was a tough adjustment. But I would say now, you know, I've adjusted.
Yeah, and I very well, might I add. Before you actually got here, though, right, on one of your vacations or trips to the U.S., you met some pretty big stars. Tell us that story.
Oh my God, that was, feel so grateful for that happened to me. But we used to visit on holidays throughout the U.S., our families. And we had family in Los Angeles. We had, you know, some connections to the entertainment industry. And we were able to get a tour of Paramount. And at the time they were filming the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi Goldberg and Demi Moore. And my brother and I got to come with we called him Uncle Carl, excuse me. Who is now deceased, but he took us to see them, and we got to meet them, and they were very welcoming, and it was such a such an opening, you know, to the star. It was a stargazing moment, definitely, and Whoopi as a Black woman, and definitely left an impression on me, and she's definitely been a role model and someone that I look up to since, and it's been amazing.
That is so special. I would cherish that. Ghost was an amazing movie, by the way. And you've started Trura magazine. I think that's really neat is that you use the publication to highlight people in typically underrepresented communities. Talk about why that's really important in the fashion industry.
You know, growing up, Kristen, I obviously cherish magazines to this day. It's one of my favorite things to do when I travel. I go to the newsstand and I buy magazines for the flight. And it's something that I love to hold it in my hand, to feel it, but also to really learn about other, you know, communities and other people and different cultures and, you know, fashion and all of these things. So it's always something that I loved. I never, you know, thought that I would have my own. So that was definitely a dream coming true. But it's important to me to really highlight those underrepresented and the people. There are so many of us that are doing beautiful, amazing work throughout the world that have amazing brands, and they don't get an opportunity to have a voice or platform to be really represented. And that's what True Magazine is all about. And we are very proud of it. The latest San Francisco issue highlights a lot of those creatives right here in the Bay Area, and we are super excited about.
And I understand you are hosting a special launch party happening this Friday, right? What can we expect?
Well, Kristen, you are definitely invited. It is tomorrow, Friday, at the Academy Social Club here in San Francisco. And it starts at 5:30, and tickets are available on my website. And we would love to have everybody come. We're celebrating Trura and all the creatives that were featured in the San Francisco issue, and just a good time out with everyone here in the Bay Area. Hopefully rainless.
Fashion, culture, food, and fun. Okay, no better combination. Tristan, congratulations. Don't go away. Let's continue to chat on Facebook Live. We'll take a short break on the air. Tristan, also, you know what? That sounds fantastic and amazing, and thank you for the invite. And we'll certainly get out there if we can. But Trura, how can people? Do people just show up? Do they need to get tickets? What's the website they go to reserve?
Absolutely. Tickets are available through our website, trura.com/events. There's a registration link there, and you can go and purchase tickets. And you can follow us on Instagram at Trura Magazine. Yeah, that's how you guys can get there.
All right, here, we're taking a look at it. We're looking at it. Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous. Look, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge that, you know, you immigrated from Haiti, and of course all summer we've been seeing images of Haitian immigrants seeking refuge in the U.S. and even before that there were so many natural disasters, earthquakes, and, you know, political upheaval with the presidential assassination. I just want to ask you, you know, how do you feel to see the country in turmoil like that? And is there something that you're doing to support them?
You know, Kristen, this is such a touchy subject. It's very emotional and very sad. There is an image circulating on social media that shows a gentleman crossing the Rio Grande with a baby around his neck and the water literally under his neck, and they're leaving because they're seeking refuge. They're seeking basic necessities for themselves and their families because the country is in turmoil and the political climate is so unstable. So it's not only heart-wrenching to see that, but I have to say it's also a little bit of motivation for me as I want to utilize that to motivate me to really continue to work as hard as I can so that I can help them. A lot of the proceeds to the event on Friday will be going to discouraged people in Haiti.
Okay.
So that will be on our website as well.
All right, another reason to go. Tristan Cunningham, thank you so much. Congratulations on Trura.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. Today we cover the drought, the rain, and the latest COVID-19 headlines. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. World News Tonight is next.